Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. Today, we have a very special guest. She is the treasurer of the Law Society of Ontario. So, thank you so much, Treasurer Teresa Donnelly, for joining us here today.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Now, perhaps maybe you could start by telling us about how you got into the practice of law and then what led you to become the treasurer of the Law Society.
Okay. Well, I'm a third generation lawyer. So my grandfather, Frank Donnelly, started a law firm in Goderich in the 1930s. So for the past almost 100 years, there's been a Donnelly practicing law in Goderich, in the family firm, actually, because it was my grandfather, then my father, and now my brother's there. So we're very much a legal family. I have four brothers. All of them are lawyers, one who's in the family firm, and my other brothers are practicing in Toronto. So I guess that's all we knew really. And then I took a little bit of a different path though. My grandpa, my father, and my brother were all defense counsel, and I went to the Crown Attorney's office 26 years ago. And then I was in Kitchener at the Crown Attorney's office in the region of Waterloo, and then I moved to Huron County. So that's a little bit about how I got into law.
So, especially with the family on the defense side, what brought you on to the Crown Attorney side? What drew you there?
Well, I was at a civil law firm in London. I was at Siskins, and I loved it. And I said I was going to leave for a year, and I was going to go to the Crown's office to get practice in court, to get courtroom experience, because I thought it was really important to have advocacy skills in a courtroom or a hearing room. So I went to the Crown Attorney's office notionally for a year, and 26 years later, that's where I was. That's where I stayed. So that's really why I went to the Crown Attorney's office, and I was drawn to it because I wanted to help people and I wanted to make a difference. And being a crown enabled me to do both those things. And so once I got there, because I could do that, and the work was challenging and interesting, it really was for me a perfect fit and a perfect career. I loved it.
I think it was last week you had just tweeted about celebrating your 30th anniversary of being called to the bar and reflecting back on the various roles lawyers and paralegals have played in shaping our justice system. So maybe you could share it with us about what this means to you today, given your role as the treasurer of the Law Society.
Well, it's a huge honor to be part of this profession, to be part of the legal profession, and the very important role that we play in Canadian society in helping people access the justice system. And that's lawyers and paralegals. That's our work. So we daily help people seek justice. We help people who have unmet legal needs, who struggle to access the justice system, and many continue to struggle now. And when I was thinking about this and thinking about 30 years of what I've been doing and how important our role is, I went back to the Federation of Law Societies of Canada's preface to the Model Code of Conduct. And the opening lines say, one of the hallmarks of a free and democratic society is the rule of law. Its importance is manifested in every legal activity in which citizens engage, from the sale of real property to the prosecution of murder to international trade. So when you think about just the vast scope of work that we as lawyers and paralegals do to help members of the public access the justice system, it really is remarkable, and it's in all aspects of life. So we have this really important role, and I just reflecting on how important we are for a free and democratic society and in upholding the rule of law.
Now, how did you get from being in the Crown Attorney's office there to becoming a bencher, first of all, and then becoming the treasurer of the Law Society?
Well, they're really not that different. So I think about it when I think about being a crown. I was a public servant, really, my whole career. I started doing some different things at the beginning, but for 26 years of a 30-year career, I was a public servant, acting in the public interest. I didn't have clients, so the client was the public. And it was always about whether or not, to prosecute a case, whether or not we had a reasonable prospect of conviction, and whether it was in the public interest. And the mandate of the Law Society as a regulator is the public interest. So there was a clear connection between the public interest component of it, the public service aspect of it. So that it doesn't when you sort of think about it and break it down, there's really a lot of common things between the work I was doing in the public interest and the decisions that I was making and how I thought about things. So that's continued, and really very much public service. As I said, wanted to make a difference. That's always been what I've wanted to do. And it seemed sort of natural to think that I had done it in terms of my work, but now to think about it in a different way in terms of the legal professions, in terms of lawyers and paralegals, and protecting the public. And how do we, how do I give back to a profession that for me has been provided me with wonderful opportunities, and really my family as well, and wonderful opportunities in helping the public. So how do you give back to that? And so being a bencher seemed like sort of the natural thing to do, and the normal natural place to go. So that's what I did. So I ran in 2015, and then I was reelected in 2019, and then 2020 I ran for treasurer. So
Now, about that, I think a lot of my students probably are wondering, you hear the word treasurer, you think they're looking over the finance or something in the corporate structure and things like that. Do you know kind of where that comes from? And maybe you can tell us a bit more about the Law Society's governance and what a bencher is and how the terms are and things like that.
so this is a little bit of a history lesson. Okay. So the Law Society, it's now the Law Society of Ontario, but it was the Law Society of Upper Canada, and it was formed in 1797. So if we go back to 1797 and we go to Niagara on the Lake, 10 of the 15 practicing lawyers in Upper Canada met, and they read an act for the better regulating the practice of law, and they formed what was then the Law Society of Upper Canada. 6 senior lawyers who were present became the first benchers, and John White was named the treasurer or the president. So the first treasurer. I'm going to get to the name in a minute. So you just got to bear with me on this history lesson. So, and the main function of the Law Society was to ensure that lawyers in the province were competent, that they followed proper procedures, and that they were ethical. So a lot of the same work that we do now. The Law Society of Ontario is the largest of all Canadian law societies, and it's one of the oldest institutions in Canada and the first law society to be formed in Canada. So that's how we started. And so where do the names come from? So it goes back even longer than that. So we go back then to the 15th century for our governance structure, and it was modeled on the Inns of Court in England. So the Inns of Court were guilds or trade unions of barristers who lived in the inns. The leader of the Inns of Court was called the treasurer because he collected the lodging and other fees of the barristers and the students in the inn. So there was a money component to it back then, John Paul, not now, but there was then. And the senior members of the Inns of Court were called benchers because they sat elevated above the others on wooden benches when they met. So I'm the treasurer at these historical terms, and the elected members, 20 inside Toronto lawyers, 20 outside Toronto lawyers, 5 paralegals, benchers are elected, and then we also have lay benchers. So that's the historical terms. Now, things have changed a lot since then. Benchers are no longer only men. Laura Legg was elected the first female bencher of the Law Society in 1975. On June 24th, 1983, she became the first female treasurer. And since then, 4 women, including me, have been elected treasurer of the Law Society. As you know, we no longer only regulate lawyers. We also regulate paralegals starting in 2007. And we, as I said, benchers are not only lawyers anymore, they're lawyers, paralegals, and lay members appointed by the Attorney General for Ontario. And we changed our name. So we are no longer the Law Society of Upper Canada, we're the Law Society of Ontario, and that happened in 2018. So that's just a little bit of a history lesson that helps you understand a little bit about our name, the historical name of the Law Society of Upper Canada, treasurer, and what benchers are.
Thanks for that historical lesson there. I had no idea where it's rooted in, and now it makes a lot more sense when we're using the terminologies, especially when we teach the intro to legal class. Like, well, why do we call them benchers? Right? It's just like a multiple choice question, but now I can provide a little bit more insight. So thank you for sharing that. Now, one of the things, certainly you've been going around to quite a bit of different law schools, paralegal colleges, and other institutions and organizations. And I think it's really important because it strengthens the connection that we have as licensees and future licensees with the Law Society and demystifies the role of what the Law Society is. So how have you found this experience? And certainly, I have joked before, it's like whenever you hear the Law Society, you see the number, you assume it's like a practice audit is coming or something there, but it's great to see it in a positive light. And maybe you can share a little bit more of some of the different things that the Law Society does for licensees and students.
So it's been a fabulous experience. So one of my priorities is strengthening connections with the legal professions, and that is doing exactly what you said, reaching out to lawyers and paralegals and trying to help them understand the role of the Law Society, and that the Law Society, as we regulate in the public interest, but we also have a very important role in supporting lawyers and paralegals in terms of their education, their competence, their ethical responsibilities. So I've made it a priority to do outreach, and this terrible pandemic, the opportunity has presented itself for more online communication, which I'm taking advantage of, to reach out, to build connections, because I don't want everyone thinking about the Law Society, okay, it's a practice audit or there's something negative happening. There's so many great programs and supports that the Law Society has that we should be talking about and that members should be using. So that's part of what I'm doing, part of my role. And the other thing is, it really gives me an insight into what's going on. What are lawyers thinking? What are paralegals thinking? So I go regionally, so to the different go to the different regions and meet with a number of people. And that tells me regionally what's happening. I also am the first treasurer to go to do this outreach to the paralegal colleges. So I've been attending as many paralegal colleges as they'll have me, and as many times. So if there's a new class, happy to come back. I in the last month of March, I went to 3L, so third year law students for Ontario law schools, which was really important to understand what are the concerns of paralegal students, what are the concerns of law students, and as well lawyers and paralegals, and in the different regions. So it's really giving me an opportunity to hear firsthand what people's concerns are, what members' concerns are. So it's been great. I wish that we weren't doing it this way. I wish that there was more opportunity for in-person contact, because as you know, and I think we're going to talk about, mental health and wellness in the legal professions is really important to me. And it's isolating the way that we're working now, but we have to manage and get through now what's being called the third wave, and we're doing that. But I can hardly wait till we get to have these connections in person as well.
And it's great, and certainly to see more connections there with the Law Society, learn more about the different initiatives that are taking place. One of them that has come up quite a lot, obviously, is access to justice, and certainly the Law Society is doing a tremendous amount there. Even regulation of paralegals going back to there, which was seen as a way to increase access to justice. Perhaps you can highlight some of the recent initiatives that the Law Society is doing to improve access to justice for those in Ontario.
So one of them, which I think you will be aware of, most paralegals will be aware of, or paralegal students and lawyers, is the Family Legal Service Provider license. So at the end of June, we did a consultation that took us until the end of November. And we asked licensees, lawyers, paralegals, legal organizations, members of the public, courts, stakeholders, anyone really, to provide us with feedback and answers to questions that we asked in the area of legal services being provided by paralegals in family law. Because we recognize that there are unmet legal needs in family law. So we did that consultation. As I said, it closed at the end of November, and now it rests with the Access to Justice Committee. So the Access to Justice Committee is looking at all the responses, and they've also engaged in some more targeted work to try to build on the information that we received, and as well questions that we still had. So did some targeted surveys and doing some other work. So they will continue to work through that and will be reporting back to Convocation on their work. So that's one of the ways. We also work very closely and are part of the action group for access to justice, which for 5 years in Ontario has facilitated very important conversations and awareness building programs. So this year, the programs focused on COVID impacts, justice sector's response, public legal education, mental health, as well as Indigenous language and human rights. So, and that's usually at the end, it's in the fall, it's a week. It's got its own website, so you can type in the Action Group for Access to Justice. And so we do that and engage in that yearly. It's also part of a national event. So some of those programs were shared with other law societies and other partners across the country. A couple of years ago, we engaged in work we refer to as civil society organizations. And that was to allow, to enable lawyer and paralegal services to be more accessible. The Law Society approved a registration system that enabled lawyers and paralegals to provide professional services to the public as employees of charities or not-for-profit corporations. And so under the initiative, registered charities and not-for-profit corporations could register with the Law Society to employ lawyers and paralegals to deliver legal services through their organizations directly to clients. So those are just a couple of the things that we're engaged in. And as I said, we have an Access to Justice Committee, and we're continually looking at what we can do to facilitate access to justice for the people of Ontario.
Thanks for sharing that. And one of the other ways, certainly to help achieve improved access to justice and to promote the public interest, is to look at making sure we have a diverse legal profession. And perhaps you can touch on some recent initiatives by the Law Society to help increase diversity within the profession, and maybe you can share some of your own thoughts there on these EDI efforts.
Well, we just launched, I don't know if you would have gotten an email, we just launched change of status surveys. So in 2008, the Retention of Women in Private Practice Working Group of the Law Society conducted a series of consultations to better understand the movement of women in the legal profession. And so to do that, they began benchmarking movements and changes within the legal profession for women. So I'm just going to talk about a couple. So in the last one for lawyers was done in 2015. And it concluded that women lawyers who are changing status tend to be disproportionately younger and to have no dependents in their households. The rate of private practice retention among women in this cohort is lower than men in the same cohort. And that this means that at an earlier stage in their career, women are leaving private practice. And there's evidence to suggest they may not be returning as they progress through their career. So then we looked at paralegals, and this concluded that women were more likely to be moving out of practice in a paralegal or law firm than are men. They appear to be leaving to find work environments that offer not only a greater ability to balance their career and family, but also provide them with job stability and benefits, both financial and other. So it gives us interesting trends about what's happening for women lawyers and women paralegals. And as I said, we're engaging in that next set of research now. We also have on the Law Society website a 3-hour e-course on advancing equality, diversity, and inclusion in the legal professions. It's available at no charge. We've developed a toolkit to assist workplaces or people to have conversations and deliver their own programs focused on EDI. Because as you know, we now have a requirement that the 1 year of continuing professional development, 1 hour of continuing professional development be on EDI topics as part of the professionalism. So to assist with that, as I said, we have the 3-hour e-course, and we also have a toolkit to advance these discussions with a facilitator's guide, the participant's guide, and bibliography. One thing that I'm finding really interesting that's happening right now is that we've been for years hosting legal equity education events. And we've found that recently the numbers are really just staggering about the number of people who are attending these. So for Black History Month, which we ran at the end of February, and for International Women's Day, which we ran early in March, we've had 2,000 people attend those sessions. And we also did International Francophonie Day a couple weeks, I guess it was last week, and turnout of just almost 500 people. And when you think about the size of the Francophone Bar in Ontario, really good numbers. And we are hosting another event on April the 7th, Holocaust Remembrance Day. And for that, last I heard, we had over 1,500 people registered. So it's just really interesting to me that these events are being so well attended. Before, we would offer them in person and webcast and not have the same attendance that we're seeing now. So we're facilitating these really important conversations, working with our stakeholder partners, and presenting really fabulous conversations for all of us to attend. So they're CPD accredited, they're free, and they're really important conversations. And you can find out more about them at the news and events page at the Law Society website, because we have coming up in May, Asian and South Asian Heritage Month. We have coming up in June, a Pride Week, National Accessibility Week, and just so many more. That's not everything that we're doing, but so many more important conversations. So those are just some of the things that come to mind that we're engaged in right now on equality, diversity, and inclusion.
Now, I see a question here from one of the students, or actually a recent call, about the Equity Advisory Group. And I believe they are looking for people. I think the deadline's coming up at the end of the month, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe you can tell us a bit about its mandate and what their role is in all of this.
So the Equity Advisory Group, a member from the Equity Advisory Group sits on our Equity and Indigenous Affairs Committee, and they provide us with assistance and guidance in our policy work on EDI. So it's important. So if you want to apply, as you've said, they're seeking membership, people for membership in that now. So it's a way in which we can continue to. It's a way in which we're consulting with our stakeholders and receiving input and advice with respect to the policy work that we should be engaging in on equality, diversity, and inclusion at the Equity and Indigenous Affairs Committee.
Now, certainly, there's a lot of great initiatives there. And what can licensees and students do to help with the Law Society in terms of our response to things like systemic racism and discrimination and the various disadvantaged groups, and achieve a goal of getting more equality, diversity, and inclusion within our profession?
So, sorry, you're asking about what can licensees do or what can students do? Well, I think we have to participate in these really important conversations. Like, I think we have to identify and talk about what the issues are, and be frank about it. And it's really important that we have a diverse bar. It's important that the people in Ontario see themselves reflected in the lawyers and paralegals who they seek to represent them. So what we need to facilitate these conversations. We need to continue to learn. We need to participate in these events. And so for students, and I think we have to sort of continue to challenge ourselves to see how we're doing. Some of the things like that the Law Society is doing is we collect information to help us understand what's happening, and they're called snapshots. So we have the paralegal snapshot that looks at so the questions are voluntary, so the paralegals that answer these questions, and we have similar ones for lawyers. It looks at the percentage of women in both the professions, racialized lawyers, Indigenous lawyers compared to the population, lawyers who identify as LGBTQ+, lawyers and paralegals who have a disability can provide services in French. So the snapshot provides us with really important information about what the composition of the profession is about. But then we have to also think about what's happening once they're inside the profession. And so those are also things that we need to be thinking about and be aware of. The snapshots are accessible on the Law Society website. So if you just type in the paralegal snapshot or the lawyer snapshot, you can get that information, which provides more details about the composition of the legal professions.
Yeah, and I know you had shared those numbers when you came and spoke with my students at Trials College a couple of weeks ago, and certainly there are a lot of encouraging signs. I think it was from the 2019 or 2018 annual report. But one of the things, unfortunately, obviously, that there are instances where students or even licensees face discrimination or harassment while either on their internship or articling or even after practicing. What resources do they have? And I think certainly people are afraid of coming forward sometimes because they think that may negatively impact them in the profession. That someone says, "Oh, they made a complaint," or what have you. But what does the Law Society have for people that find themselves, unfortunately, in situations like that?
So we have discrimination and harassment counsel. So what that is it's three lawyers who highly qualified, who provide information to anyone, members of the public, lawyers, paralegals, students, anyone who's witnessed or faced discrimination on human rights grounds by a lawyer, a paralegal, or a student a student member of the Law Society. So it's really a safe space. So it's a place where people can go to get advice. What's going to happen if I come forward and I say that what's happening to me? You can talk to discrimination and harassment counsel. You can understand what your options are. They can provide you with resources, guidance, and really help you to know that you're not alone and that you don't have to struggle through this and worry about what the consequences are, that you have a place to go. The website is www.dhcouncil.on.ca. So dhcouncil.on.ca. It's called Discrimination and Harassment Council. It's free to use. It's absolutely confidential. So while the Law Society funds this program, there's no connection in terms of the program council are not calling us up saying, did you know that this student is in this placement and is complaining about their principal? That doesn't happen. It's confidential. And it really is important that that people who need it are using this. It's important so that they're not suffering alone, but it's just important because they need to understand what their options are and make informed decisions to deal with what they're going through. So as I said, it's dhcouncil.on.ca, and really encourage people to use it who are experiencing or witnessing discrimination or harassment on human rights grounds, or know somebody else who is.
Now, certainly, over the last year, there's been the pandemic, and we're into our third wave, unfortunately. And COVID-19 has decimated a number of law practices and sole practitioners, especially paralegals who tend to practice in that way a lot more so than lawyers. What are some of the things the Law Society has done to alleviate some of these burdens faced by our licensees?
Well, we're always continuing to look at what we can do and how we can support people. But if people are not practicing, or they've seen a change in their status, they can change their status, right? Which might move them down to a lower fee category if they're struggling. We had a fee deferral option for eligible lawyers and paralegals, which they could apply for. It closed at the end of March. We changed the rules with respect to continuing professional development, and how there used to be more requirements on terms of sort of self-learning, or changing what the requirements were. We developed COVID-19 page on the website, which really is meant to be a place for people to go and to have their questions answered, because the pandemic changed things overnight in the practice of law and the provision of legal services. And the Law Society worked really hard to answer those questions, so to provide practical guidance on what the issues were: remote commissioning, virtual identification, cybersecurity. We also provided guidance and information for students in the licensing process at paralegal colleges, to tell them about what's happening in terms of the examinations, paralegal education, placements, articling. There was just so much going on. So really looked hard at what we could do to support the professions, and continuing to flag mental health as an issue, and how important it is that we have these conversations, and that people know about the member assistance program. I think, John Paul, that we're going to talk about maybe a little bit more later, and also that you're going to hear tomorrow from Doron Gold about.
Yeah, certainly. And just Mr. Gold will be on tomorrow for anyone listening. So you can definitely tune in and learn all about the member assistance program. Now, perhaps related to what we were just talking about, I think you had brought up in the paralegal snapshot, I believe, there was some concern from my students about the numbers with respect to specifically paralegals that are sort of in not actively practicing. How has the Law Study looked into maybe looking more into that? I mean, I understand that's only self-reporting data from the annual report, but any reasons why this may be the case, and have they looked at programs that may stem perhaps the exit from the profession for some of those people?
Well, so this, as you know, John Paul, is a concern to me. And I'm hopeful that we are soon going to launch a comprehensive study of the paralegal profession to look at these issues, to give us a better understanding about what's happening in the profession, why people are leaving, so that we can start from a policy level to address that. So stay tuned for that. I think we'll be seeing something on that, or hearing more about that.
I do see a question here about newly minted licensees and what resources may be available for them in light of COVID-19. I think you tweeted something earlier today that maybe could perfectly address that question.
So I did tweet today about a program for lawyers. It's newly called Lawyers or Those in the Articling Stream, which is called Bridge to Practice. And it's free. There's also a LinkedIn page that goes with it. So it's really trying to build the supports to help licensing candidates move through the process. So that's for lawyers, and we'll be looking at what we can do to support paralegals in the same way as they move on to practice. But if you're looking for information, so if you're a young lawyer or not young, a new paralegal, I should say young in terms of practice, so a new paralegal or a new lawyer, think about what else we have to offer. That is the Practice Management Helpline that provides assistance and guidance on ethical or practice management issues. The Coach Advisor Network that provides, as it says, coaching, which is an hour and a half for the first meeting, and then 30-minute sessions for approximately 3 months. And that's for best practices or skills development. And advising is much more sort of file specific. So 30-minute, up to a 30-minute call for advice on a file or a specific issue. So for me, as a young lawyer or paralegal, I just really urge you to take advantage of these supports, especially the Coach Advisor Network, because it will help you build connections and build relationships. Plus, it's going to teach you skills development and assist you with your files. So it's free. So I just think it's really important that you build these relationships.
You highlighted some of the other positives there from COVID-19 about things like virtual commissioning and notarizing. And one of the other things we've seen with virtual hearings and trials and set date courts, for example. Now, being a former Crown, what are your thoughts on seeing some of these changes and modernization? I know think they've slowly doing away with faxing. I remember I would always have to ask a friend to send a fax sometimes for me, or one of the electronic ones. But what are your thoughts and concerns, maybe from being a former Crown, and certainly now from your role as the treasurer of the Law Society, of these changes?
So I mean, the justice system had to modernize. I think. And I think the movement online in many ways is positive. Um, I think that there are things we still have to work through and think through about what part of our advocacy at hearings or courts should be done in person and what part of it can be done online. I think is for some lawyers and paralegals and clients, being able to attend some routine appearances or matters electronically without the travel and the sort of wasted travel time, the sitting in courts, that there are improvements, the electronic filing of documents, so those materials. So there's lots of modernization happening, but we have to understand when going forward, when should we be in person and when should we be online? And also I worry a lot about the vulnerable and how they're managing in an online world. I think about my prior role as a Crown, where I did a lot of work in sexual violence and in intimate partner violence. And I worry about women mainly locked in their home, and perhaps with an abusive partner, and how, what safeguards do we have to ensure that if they're having to testify or communicate through the computer, that they're safe, and that they're able to freely testify. I worry about people who don't have the same uh, access to technology, whether it's computer or cell phone or internet, or a safe place in their house to to give evidence or attend hearings, and that those are the realities for many, many people. I think about self-represented people, and how do they access the justice system? What about someone who's homeless or struggling with addictions? How do we make sure that they're not being left behind? Who are the silent victims who are not able to participate? When I say victims, I mean victims, accused, witnesses who don't have the same opportunities and the same access to technology that many of us do have. So, well, there's a lot that's positive. I think we still have a lot to learn, and there's lots more work to do to make sure that as we move and we rush to modernize, that we're not leaving people behind. And I think about, accessibility. Hearings have always been open to the public in the majority of cases, unless special circumstances, but this gives open to the public whole new meaning in terms of being accessible at any time by anyone. And what are the limits of that? And what should the limits of that be? And so I think that there's lots more we have to think about and do. Um, and so while there's lots of modernization and that's really good, I think we have to think through some more things.
Yeah, certainly. I think it was the Therio decision. 20,000 plus people were watching on YouTube. Which, again, if you were fortunate enough to get one of those prime seats, beat out the Toronto Star reporters, that you can only hold about 40, 50 normally in a small courtroom there at most. So that's a great, in terms of access to justice, that's a great thing that we were seeing that. But again, as you point out, what stops someone from recording it and putting things out there without permission? And certainly with 20,000 people having access, it just takes one to violate some of the rules that we have in place. Now, for my students, another concern comes with respect to, and depending on the student, some think it's a great positive, is that their licensing exams are now being done remotely, both for law students and paralegal students. And as well, I think a lot of the internships are being offered in more of a hybrid or remote environment, and probably the articling terms as well. Is this something that you think is here to stay? And have you been able to get any feedback thus far? I know it's only been a year from what this experience has been like for those who are newly licensed or in the process of becoming licensed.
Well, the professional development and competence team has been working really, really hard because that affected them. Students in the licensing process, people who wanted to be called to the bar, people who wanted to write their licensing examinations, were in placements, articling. So the Law Society has been consulting throughout with students, with paralegal colleges, with law schools as we've transitioned. So the last number that I heard was that as of we started these online examinations in June, and most recently we had 6,400 examinations done online. So that's remarkable. And overall, we're hearing that the transition to the online licensing exams has gone very well. So, and as I said, we're seeking feedback from students and colleges, people in the process. And we've made a decision that for the next 3 years, the examinations, licensing examinations, are going to be online for lawyers and paralegals. That came to February convocation. We're still working through what it means for articling right now. The 8-month, we've said it's a minimum articling placement of 8 months, so it can be 8 up to 10. And that's through for another year. And we're continuing assessing this. For example, for placements, we move to, if they're in person, if it's safe, simulated placements, remote placements, really trying to help to ensure that the experiential component of the training is still received by students. So as we go through, we're working through it. We're continuing to gather information and consult and trying, to make informed decisions as we go through.
I think related to that, last year certainly there was a very great event there for newly licensed or new calls. I believe it was in the fall there that you participated in. But I do recall, maybe I'm not sure exactly, but I think my brother got licensed. So we're not quite as big as your family there with the licensees that are lawyers, but he got called last year. And I think it was quite the contrast, obviously, from when I got called in 2013. Is there any discussion? Have you looked into maybe having like a virtual kind of call to the bar ceremony with convocation, or are you looking at continuing to provide events like the one that we had last fall?
Well, it's hard. We have, normally at a call to the bar, we might have 35 people on the stage, and now to do that socially distanced and masked, and we couldn't have people at convocation in the room, at Roy Thompson Hall. So, there are practical limitations. And just when we think that maybe we're through one stage, then we're back in the next, and now the next. And so we're really assessing as we go along about when can we return to in-person calls. No determinations have been made yet. And while I know it's not the same as being called on paper, or an administrative call to the bar is not the same as the wonderful celebrations that we've hosted in the past, we also know that we can't hold people up from their careers and not license them, not call them to the bar or license paralegals because we're waiting to do it in person. So while it's not optimum, it's not the best way to do it. It's the reality of what we have right now. So we did do a welcome to the professions, which was the first time lawyers and paralegals have been welcomed together. So there wasn't a separate call to the bar and a separate welcoming ceremony for paralegals. We did it together to welcome our new licensees. So we'll continue to assess what's the next step and what else we should be doing. But I appreciate it's not the same as what you went through. So maybe don't be celebrating too much about how great yours was. Don't be telling your brother all the really positive things. But we really just have to deal with the world as it presents itself to us now.
Now, speaking of COVID-19, we've touched on this, and I know it's something very important to you with respect to dealing with mental health, especially at a time of isolation where we definitely need to all come together and offer support within the profession, whether we can do it virtually or socially distant. I know I have Doran Gold coming on tomorrow, but perhaps maybe you can share about the member assistance program and some of the other resources that the Law Society has for ensuring proper supports for mental health and wellness.
So the members assistance program is really important. It's free, it's accessible to lawyers, paralegals, eligible family members, members of the judiciary, and students. So students at accredited paralegal colleges and Ontario law schools. So really, really important resource. And it's so much more than just counseling. It is counseling, but it's a lot more. Online resources, peer-to-peer support. So I won't spend too much more time on that because I know Doran is coming tomorrow to talk about it. But I will say that we are actively engaged in trying to improve our work on mental health. We have a mental health working group. For many years, as I said, the MAP program has been funded by the Law Society and by Law Pro. We have a summit coming up. So we've had a family summit and a real estate summit, and I think there's an estate summit. And so I said, why don't we have a mental health summit? Because we need to recognize mental health and wellness in the profession. So I'm so pleased to say that now we do. So it's going to be held on May 19th and 20th, 2 half-day sessions. with a number of lived experienced licensees, lawyers and paralegals, and also a number of experts to talk about mental health in the legal professions. I'm very pleased to be co-chairing that with Beth Beatty. We also, on February the 5th, worked with Law Pro and the Toronto Lawyers Association to host managing mental health through the pandemic, and over 1,600 people attended. And last I heard, 500 people had gone on to see it. So that was again free. And we're going to hold a second follow-up session, and it's the second week in June. I'm forgetting the date right now, if it's the 15th, I can't remember, but we are holding another one. So there's just really important conversations happening about mental health and wellness. And we need to continue to do that, because we have to get the message across that even though what we're going through now is isolating, when we're not in person, when we're not getting these connections, that we are still connected, and we need to support each other. We need to support and look after ourselves, but also look out for and after each other. I think it's just really important that we do that. So those are just some of the things that we're dealing with doing about mental health right now.
Now, looking back at your time as a Crown, how did you cope with everything? And certainly, if you have any personal tips to share with my students and any new licensees listening about, the stress of either school or practice and life, and certainly now with COVID-19 on top of that, and do you miss practicing at all in your new role here as the treasurer?
So yes, I miss practicing. But when I left, I was one of 7 crowns in the province who was dedicated to sexual violence prosecutions. I was a member of the Sexual Violence Advisory Group, working with really dedicated, amazing colleagues. And I did that for 5 years, and I loved it. It was really, really good, important work. I said I wanted to make a difference when I joined the Crown system, and I really felt that there I was just able to do so much. So I really do miss it, but I love what I'm doing. So it's totally different in terms of the actual hands-on or day-to-day work, but I love it. I love being the treasurer. You asked me, how did I cope, as a prosecutor who dealt with terrible things: murder, sexual assault, impaired driving causing death, domestic violence, just really, and including adults and children. So, terrible work. And, I think we have to, in our work, be careful about vicarious trauma. We have to be thoughtful about how what we're exposed to in our work as lawyers and paralegals takes a toll on us. We think we're invincible. We think, I'm a problem solver. That's what we do. That's the nature of our work: problem solving and helping people. And sometimes we forget about ourselves along the way. And I think it's important to remember that we don't have to be invincible. We don't have to be everything to everybody, and that it's okay to say, I can't take it. I can't take that on. I need help. I need to talk to somebody. So, some of the things I do is try to set boundaries. And so for me, it's in terms of, the work home life. That's harder now with COVID, but trying to set boundaries in terms of not working all the time, having a certain part of the house or place, if you can, where's your workspace. I'm not connected to my phone all the time. I don't have it with me 24 hours a day. I put it down and I don't look at it. And I figure if it's an emergency, there's ways to get in touch with me. But I don't feel this overwhelming urge to always respond immediately. I'm trying to dial it back on the weekends, so that, because I know that if I'm communicating with people on the weekends, I'm putting pressure on them to respond. So I have to be thoughtful about myself and how what I'm doing is impacting on other people. Give yourself a break, about, does it have to be perfect? Look out for yourself. Be cognizant of what's going on in your life. Remember that you're not alone. And for many people, model behavior, especially if you're in positions of management or leadership, think about how you're being a role model really sets the standard for the people that you're engaged with. So there's so many different things that we can do, and it's about staying connected, recognizing what we're facing, and reaching out when you need help.
I think also with your time as Crown, did you find certainly with all your family members or a lot of your family members on the other side, how were the conversations, at holidays or around the dinner table? What did you find from that experience?
Well, that is a very interesting question. So you must know that I'm one of 10. So although 50% of us are lawyers, the other 5 are not, and neither was my mother. So we actually didn't have, and we all practice in different areas, actually. My brother and I are both criminal law. I'm prosecutor, he's defense, but we really, that was the boundaries. I think that with so many lawyers at the table, my mother that was just not going to happen. We were not taking over. And plus my other siblings who were not lawyers were like, that's not happening either. So we're a very, very close family. And we didn't have a lot of those dinner conversations, interestingly enough, and probably surprisingly so.
Probably certainly for the better for the rest of the family there. Now, so thank you so much for taking the time and joining us here today. Certainly a lot to learn about yourself and the Law Society and all the different initiatives. Maybe if you can end with some final pieces of advice for my students and certainly for educators like myself to better equip students for entering into the profession. Any words of wisdom for anyone listening about taking the step there and getting into the practice of law and what you found has worked for you. And thanks once again for joining us.
Okay, so I just want to say that, as I said, I love practicing law, and I hope for you what I had in terms of the fulfillment in my chosen profession. So for you as an educator, and for students, meaningful placements. So that the placements that you're getting are providing you with experiential training, valuable connections. I think about students joining legal organizations. So whether it's the Ontario Paralegal Association or the Ontario Bar Association or Women's Law Association, like depending lawyers, paralegals, or your local law association, because these are places for support and connections. They're sources for referrals, answering questions, mentoring. I think they support mental health. So there's just so much that these organizations can provide, and to remember that you're not alone. And that's in terms of, building connections through maybe the coach advisor network or formal or informal mentoring with your colleagues that you meet along the way, either through placements or through these legal organizations. Go to court, go to tribunals. I spent the first 2 years of my career as a lawyer working for the Superior Court and the Superior Court. I went to court all the time. I watched and I said, oh, I like how this person's doing that. I like how I learned about the presentation of evidence, about effective advocacy. And then I talked to the judges after. Did this work? Did that work? So go to court and tribunals, learn and listen by watching. And also use the Law Society's resources. Go to your source and learn about the breadth and depth of the materials that the Law Society has to help you. Because we want you not just to survive in the profession, we want you to thrive. I want you to thrive too. And I want you to take advantage of these resources because that's what they're there for. They're there to help you. And, this idea that once you get licensed that you should know everything, that's not right. I say every single day of my career, 30 years later, every single day I learned, and I'm continuing to learn. I've never thought that I've known everything, and I've always wanted to continue learning. And that's served me well. So I just encourage you to think the same way, to have that thirst for knowledge and for learning. And if you do, I think you're setting yourself up for a successful practice.
Perfect. So thank you so much once again. And certainly for those listening, you can connect with the treasurer on Twitter there. She can maybe share her handles, or Eddie, I think you can pop it into the YouTube chat if you have any further questions. And thanks so much again for joining us here today.
Thank you. And it is, follow me on Twitter. I think it's LSO Treasurer. That's mine. We also have a corporate account as well. So yeah, follow me because I post about information. Thank you so much, John Paul. I know it's a lot of work what you do in running this series. It's a very valuable and informative series for your students, but for everyone else. Lawyers, lawyers, paralegals, members of the public. 300 interviews, I think you've said you've done. That's absolutely amazing and really so valuable in educating everyone. So thank you very much.
Thanks for those kind words, and wish everyone all the best. And tomorrow, again, as we talked about Doran Gold and all about the mental health and wellness and the great resources that the Law Society has, also open to students. And a lot of people don't realize that it is open to students, not just lawyers and paralegals, and free and confidential. So thanks again. All the best.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Thanks, JP and Rochelle. Have a great day, everyone.